good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Today I've prepared a very useful, as usual, structure which I basically tend to teach to my students because I find this structure very useful in business English. So if you want to sound a bit more fancy, a bit more professional, especially in this business environment, then this is the structure for you. I find it very important, like I've said, and this is what we're gonna work on today. I'm gonna provide you with lots of examples and at the end some small sentence translation. Firstly, let's have a look at the structure. How do we build it? So basically you have two options how you can create this structure, and I'm gonna show you two of them. However, firstly, we will take a look at the first option. So you see, you basically say, I find it or something. I find it plus adjective, difficult, easy, important, boring, whatever. The sky is the limit here. So I find it difficult, and then this verb in the infinitive form to do something. I find it difficult to do something. And now, when do we use this useful structure? So basically, very often during my classes, I can hear something like, it is difficult for me to speak English. And this is completely fine. Don't get me wrong. This is correct to say it is difficult for me to speak English, or it is important for me to have a good salary, for example. But if you wanted to introduce a bit more variety into your English, you could actually use this structure. And how would we change this sentence? It is difficult for me to speak English. I find it difficult to speak English. Okay, is that clear? I find it difficult to speak English. And now I've provided you with some translations. However, you have to bear in mind that this structure is not easy to be translated. So you can, well, find some translation, but it will never be, literal or perfect. That's why if I were you, I wouldn't really get used to these Polish translations so much. I would just memorize that whenever you want to say, it is difficult for me to do something. It is important for me to do something. Then you can also say, I find it difficult to do something. I find it important to do something. Of course, I'm going to give you more examples, a lot of examples today, so bear with me. Let's have a look at another one. So another example, I find it easy to do something. Let's read it together. I find it easy to give presentations. So again, you could say, it is easy for me to give presentations, or giving presentations is easy for me. You could say it in English, it's correct, but again, if you want to sound a bit more professional, a bit fancy, then you can always say, I find it easy to give presentations in English, you could say, possibly. Are you with me? Is that clear so far? Because now I'm going to show you the second option, how you can use this structure. I hope I won't mix things up, but well, still I'm going to compare these two options so that you could also get a better idea how these two options work. So now, structure number 2, pay attention. I find doing something difficult. So now you have this adjective at the end, and you firstly have this verb with the ing ending, this gerund form. So compare, in the previous example, we had, I find it difficult to do something. Here, I find doing something difficult. Is that clear? Examples. I find speaking English difficult. So in the previous example, we had, I find it difficult to speak English. Here, I find speaking English difficult. You might ask me, so what's the difference between these two options, these two structures? Well, I would say there is no difference. You can just choose the one you prefer, the one which sounds a bit more natural to you. But I guess you will just have this preference in a minute. Sometimes you will use this one, sometimes you will use the one with the infinitive form. So I will provide you with some examples and you will basically decide at the end which option is, well, more natural for you, more pleasant, I suppose. Are you ready for more examples? Let's have a look at them. So now, I find giving presentations easy. And again, in the previous example, we said, I find it easy to give presentations. So in the previous example, we had this adjective first. I find it easy. I find it difficult to do something. Here, we firstly have this verb with the ing ending and then the adjective at the end. I find giving presentations easy. Okay? And now I'd like to show you more pairs, and this time we're going to compare these two options, these two structures, so that you could see where the difference is exactly. Okay? So, I find it interesting to meet new people. So instead of saying, it is interesting for me to meet new people, or instead of saying, meeting new people is interesting for me, of course it's correct to say, but then you can always use this find structure. I find it interesting, adjective, to meet new people. And the other option would be as follows. I find meeting new people interesting. So you firstly have the verb, this gerund form, this ing ending. I find meeting new people interesting. And I can give you a tip here. In this particular example, I would personally prefer the first option. Why? Because, well, this phrase that you put in the middle in the second example, I find meeting new people and then interesting. Like, I have this feeling that you're kind of putting too much in the middle versus the first example is like, I find it interesting to meet new people. So personally, I think that I tend to choose the first option more often whenever we have some longer phrase later on, meet new people. So I find it interesting to meet new people. Or I find meeting new people interesting. You can, of course, choose the one which suits you best, but this is just my preference. I would personally choose the first option. Next one, next pair. You know, I find this situation stressful. And you see, here you actually don't have a verb. Pay attention. You only have a noun and the adjective. So I find what? This situation stressful, right? But of course, if you really wanted to add a verb, then you could say, I find it stressful to contact the client. I find it, you have to add it, I find it stressful to contact the client. I know that this structure is not so easy, right? So you may not find it easy at first because, well, you need to practice, right? This is a bit more advanced structure. So if you're a beginner, don't feel angry, don't feel frustrated. This is a higher level of English. So give yourself some time, practice. Perhaps you could just write these sentences down and, read them every day. Perhaps you could enter them into this Quizlet application. You could revise them, you could learn them by heart. And then, slowly you will just get used to these structures. You will get used to creating such sentences, and eventually, sooner or later, it will become your favorite structure. Who knows? So this is how you basically learn English. It's not straightforward. It's not automatic. It requires some practice, some regularity, right? Revision. So I find something stressful, or I find it stressful to do something. Another pair. Now I'd like to show you how to use this structure in different tenses, because it's also possible. And I suppose this phrase is very common. I personally use it a lot in my videos. At the end of the class, very often I say, I hope you found this class useful. So I actually use it in the present perfect tense. I say, I hope you've found this class useful, right? But here, I hope you will find it useful. Or whenever you're writing an email, you could say, I hope you will find this information useful. I hope you will find this task interesting. Another one, here we actually have past simple, past tense. I found it difficult to understand him. So you see, instead of saying it was difficult for me to understand him, you could simply say, I found it difficult to understand him. Okay? I know it's not very intuitive, this structure, but again, the more you practice, the more natural it will become. Next, pair. Now I'd like to show you negations, how to negate this structure. So you could, for example, say, well, I don't find it interesting at all. So instead of saying, it's not interesting for me, it's not interesting for me, your idea is not interesting for me, you can just say, well, to be honest, I don't find it interesting. At all is quite strong, right? Of course, you could also say it in the past. To be honest, I didn't find it interesting. To be honest, Asha, I didn't find your class useful. I hope you will never say this, but you get the idea. Next example. Unfortunately, the client didn't find our product attractive. So you see, you could obviously say, the client didn't like our product. Okay, you could say that. The client didn't like our product. Or the client said that our product wasn't attractive at all. Sure, you can use these phrases, but at the same time, you could say, the client didn't find our product attractive. Sounds professional, sounds elegant and fancy, right? Are you ready for more examples? We have some questions now. Have a look. Do you find it interesting? This is also a very nice question. So I could ask you, okay, could you please let me know in the comments, do you find this class useful? Do you find this class interesting? So now if you want to, you can actually stop the video and leave this comment. Do you find this class interesting or useful or practical? Let me know in the comments. And remember, you can write, Asha, I find or I found this class very useful, very practical, because I will be very happy to read your comments, and at the same time you're going to practice this structure. So that's a win-win. You combine business with pleasure, I suppose. Killing two birds with one stone. Have a look at the other question. Do you find it easy to conduct negotiations? So instead of saying, is it easy for you to conduct negotiations? Is it easy for you to conduct negotiations? You could actually say, do you find it easy to? Remember, you can also memorize this ready-made question. Do you find it easy to? And then you can basically add any verb you want. Do you find it easy to speak English? Do you find it easy to give presentations? Or do you find it difficult? Do you find it difficult to learn new words? Do you find it difficult to communicate with this client? So do you find it easy, difficult, important to do something? So it's like a ready-made structure you could use. The same, do you find it stressful? Do you find it important? Do you find it difficult? Do you find it motivating? Do you find it boring? Do you find it tiring, right? So here we actually have the adjective only. It meaning the thing we've been talking about before, like sport, activity, task, right? Job. So do you find it interesting? Meaning, do you find your job interesting? So instead of this it, you could also add any noun. Do you find your job interesting? Do you find your tasks challenging? Right? Are you with me? I know it's like a lot to digest, a lot to process, but remember, you can always get back to this video, right? And most importantly, you have the notes below this video, so you can always take a look at them. You can print them and, well, you can read them, revise these structures every now and then. Let's have a look at some more questions. And here we have this question in the past. Did you find it difficult to fix it? Did you? So now we don't have this question, do you, present simple. Now we have, did you? Did you find it difficult to fix it? So again, instead of saying, was it difficult for you to fix it? You could say, did you find it difficult to fix it? And the answer would be, I found it really difficult to fix it. So instead of saying, it was very difficult for me to fix it, you could say, I found it very difficult to fix it. Next question, the last one, I suppose. Did you find it challenging to complete this task? Did you find it challenging, so you can put any adjective here, to complete this task? So actually, when you think of it, you will probably see that mostly we are using this first option with this infinitive form, like I find it difficult to do something. Do you find it difficult to do something? So I suppose this one is more common, and if you don't want to, mix things up at the beginning, you can just decide that you're gonna use this option only, and then in the future you can just experiment with these two options. And I suppose that's it when it comes to these examples, useful examples. You will have them in the PDF. But now I'd like to do some exercise with you to see how much you've learned today, how much you've remembered, because I know it requires further, practice and revision. But let's see, maybe that's going to be like a nice revision for you of what we've learned today. So what's your task? It's not going to be sentence translation actually, but you're going to have some sentence in English, and your task is to paraphrase this sentence using the structure we've learned today. You can use option number 1, option number 2, doesn't matter, whatever comes to your mind. So now I want you to stop the video and then get back to me, and I'm going to read the answer. You have the beginning of the phrase provided. Stop the video. Okay, so let's have a look, shall we? She finds her salary very important. So you see, obviously it's correct to say she thinks her salary is very important. Or you could say her salary is very important to her. There is nothing wrong in these sentences, but then you could say she finds her salary very important. There is no verb here, right? So you don't have this to, you don't have infinitive, because there is no verb here. She finds what her salary, an adjective, very important. Another one. It was very hard for me to speak in public. And now you have the phrase provided. Stop the video and let's read the answer together. I found it very hard to speak in public. So you see, the first option is with this infinitive form. I found it very hard to speak in public. Or you could use this gerund form, this ing ending. I found speaking in public very hard. And again, I personally prefer the first option. I suppose it's a bit easier, isn't it? Stop the video if you want to process these sentences. Otherwise, number 3. This book is not interesting for me. How would you paraphrase this sentence? Stop the video, translate, and get back to me. Okay, time for the answer. I don't find this book interesting or attractive. I don't find this book interesting. Is that clear? Does it make sense? I hope it does. Number 4. It is very stressful for me to live in the city. Very nice sentence, right? But you could paraphrase it using I find structure. Stop the video and let's read the answer. Remember that if you stop the video, then you can basically think, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 1 minute. Take as much time as you need and then continue with the video, okay? If I'm not giving you enough space, you can always stop the video. The answer, I find it stressful to live in the city. So I find it stressful to do something. Or the second option, I find living in the city stressful. So you're putting the whole collocation, so you're putting the whole phrase in the middle. I find what? Living in the city stressful, okay? Or I find it stressful to live in the city. And number 5, questions. Do you think this solution is efficient? Do you think this solution is efficient? Stop the video. Do you have the answer? Let's have a look. Do you find this solution efficient? So there is no other option here because we don't have this verb, right? If we don't have a verb, we can't use this to here. So do you find this solution efficient? This is the only option here. Do you find this solution efficient? Okay. And the last one, was this information useful to you? So the structure is a bit different because the primary sentence is like, was this information useful to you? But then you will start with, did you? Stop the video, create the sentence. And now, I hope you're ready. Did you find this information useful? Did you find this information useful? So again, you don't have a verb here, so there is no infinitive, there is no to, right? Did you find what? This information, and then adjective, useful. Okay, I think we have one more to go, so bear with me, stay patient. He was speaking so fast that I could hardly understand him. So he was speaking so fast that I couldn't understand him. And I will give you a tip here. You will start with I found it. Try to think, I found it. Stop the video. And now let's have a look at the answer. He was speaking so fast that I found it impossible to understand him. Or I found it hard to understand him. Or I found it difficult to understand him. Are you with me? I know it's very tricky. It's like high level of English, but well, it sounds quite nice, quite natural, doesn't it? So I really recommend that you keep practicing. The structure is very useful. You can impress your boss, your colleagues at work if you use English at work. So I really recommend that you practice this structure. And now, of course, remember, as usual, below this video there is a link so you can subscribe to my newsletter, and every time a new video is released, you will receive this PDF with all the notes, all the examples, some extra sentence translations, so it's really worth joining. Have a lovely day. Cheers!